Wight County School Board is in session. Madam Clerk, can we get a roll call, please?
Mr. Cunningham?
Present.
Mr. Collett?
Present.
Mrs. Perkins?
Present.
Mr. Wooster?
Present.
And Mr. Marsh?
Present. Mr. Vice Chair.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to amend the agenda to add the following items. The approval of agenda or amendments for closed session, motion to go into closed session, reconvene into open session, certification of resolution of compliance, and to adopt the proposed amended agenda.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Madam Clerk, will you take a vote, please?
Mr. Cunningham?
Yay.
Mr. Collett?
Yay.
Mrs. Perkins?
Yes.
Mr. Wooster?
Yes.
And Mr. Marsh?
Yes. Back to you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda for closed session.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Madam Clerk?
Mr. Cunningham?
Yay.
Mr. Collett?
Yay.
Mrs. Perkins?
Yes.
Mr. Wooster?
Yes.
And Mr. Marsh?
Yes. And on that, we'll go into closed session for roughly 15 minutes.
I need to make a motion to go into closed session.
What was that?
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to go into closed session to discuss the resignation of a central office staff member as authorized by Virginia Code 2.2-3711A1.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Madam Clerk?
Mr. Cunningham?
Yay.
Mr. Collett?
Yay.
Mrs. Perkins?
Yes.
Mr. Wooster?
Yes.
And Mr. Marsh?
Yes. And once again, thank you for keeping me straight, Madam Clerk. And on that, we'll be in closed session for approximately 15 minutes.
this in overdrive.
All right. All right, Wight County School Board is in session. Mr. Vice Chair.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion. The closed meeting was conducted in conformity with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act as required by Section 2.2-3712D of the Code of Virginia, and certify that only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements were discussed, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, Madam Clerk.
Yay.
Mr. Colick,
Yay.
Mrs. Perkins,
Yes.
Mr. Wooster,
Yes.
and Mr. Marsh.
Yes. Motion passes. Mr. Vice Chair, would you be so kind to lead us in a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance?
If everyone please stand. Now the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Excuse me.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and for anybody who's watching from the live feed. It's February 28th, 2024, and this is the second Wight County School Board discussion on the fiscal year 25 budget. I'm sure there will be many more to follow. Last time we met, we started talking about the quad slides that were presented, and we got about halfway through. And so tonight we'll carry on where we left off last week. Just as soon let the staff present the quad slides and afford the board a chance to ask questions and exchanging some good conversation. And hopefully we can get out of here by 8 o'clock. Set that as a target time, no later than 8. Dr. Coleman, you remember which slide we left off on last time
We
exactly?
left off on slide 33.
33.
That was the last slide that we did.
Thank you, sir.
Compensation study.
Budget items, special education.
So we will start off with human resources requests. We will start off with human resource requests.
All right. First one is the compensation study. Any discussion, comments on that?
Hold on.
Slide 35.
Yeah, I think I've got one comment, Mr. Chair, and the only thing is I asked for this last year. In fact, I think a number of us did, including staff and board members. So I think it's very important that we have, so that we have a good idea of what everybody should be getting paid, no matter, what their position is within a school division. And it lets the Board of Supervisors know who ultimately fund us, and the taxpayers, so that everything is fair, everything is above board, and we're not just shooting from the hip. So I'm a big advocate of this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments?
I also concur, this is something we need. Looking here at the background, it's been 7 years. We definitely need to know what they should be getting paid. I mean, they deserve, I'm sure they deserve an increase after 7 years. That's all I have.
Anyone else want to speak to this? And just to be clear, this would be a one-time expense.
That's correct. And something that we would want to consider putting on a cycle, if we wanted to get suggestions from the compensation study about how often, whether it's a 3 year, 5 year, so it's a one-time payment, but that we're looking to prepare for on cycles of budget years.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Anything else from the board? Moving right along, slide 36, referral and signing bonuses.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Again, I do have some questions. So my first question is how much money is going to be awarded as a signing bonus for incoming teachers?
So that's definitely something that we can look at discussing based on the amount that's allocated. So in preparing for the 300,000 amount, that's double what we utilized last year for signing and referral bonuses. And so if we were thinking that, that amount is not, what we feel comfortable allocating for this particular initiative, we could consider offering less per teacher, less per referral, less per signing bonus. Last year it was $4,000 for a signing bonus for a very short period of time. It was a 1-month hiring campaign. I doubled that amount thinking that we would be able to potentially offer that to any new hire going into next year, because I knew that that was a point of concern for some of the board, that they wanted anyone who was coming on in that new hire role, whether it was during a specific month or not, that they would receive the signing bonus.
Now, using this number of $300,000, how much would you expect that a single teacher who is coming on board gets a signing bonus? How much would that teacher get using this as the ultimate amount?
So if we used $4,000 as a signing bonus, that would get us 42 positions as a 4,000, and then it also included approximately 20 referrals at $1,000.
Okay, so the signing bonus would be $4,000, the referral bonus $1,000.
That's what we did last year, and again, if we were to just, like, for example, if right now we do not know specifically how many openings that we're going to be hiring for next year. We have a good estimate because we've done the intent and we've had teachers be, it's wonderful when someone lets us know if they're not returning. We'd love for them to come back, but giving us advance notice makes it more likely for us to fill their spot with a qualified candidate. And so at this point, we could afford that. But if the numbers grew, we would maybe then have to consider, as we're getting into the hiring season, do we decrease the amount per person in order to allow it to support more hires?
What is the average signing bonuses?
So 4,000 is pretty. 4,000 is a ample signing bonus, I guess I would say. Like a lot of our other divisions are doing 2,500.
Right.
And part of that is because our base is lower than their base.
No.
And so we decided to go with 4,000 to get us at what another division would be offering them, because their salary is already higher than ours. But $2,500 is what you see a lot for a signing bonus.
Okay, and that's usually within school divisions who aren't able to recruit as good as we are, because you do a remarkable job in recruiting. So I'm wondering, would that be, a little bit high, almost double what some other municipalities or some other divisions are doing, and they're getting some of the people that they need. So I'm curious, is that too high?
So I would say, and I appreciate that, but I do think it's our building principals and our current teachers that are actually doing the majority of the recruiting. And so they are convincing people to come here because of the culture and the climate.
Right.
At the end of the day, when I make that offer, the numbers are the numbers. And when someone is being offered by Suffolk, $5,000 more than we can just from the start of the base, and they're new to the area and haven't really heard anything about our school division, they are just going to say, oh, with other divisions, $5,000 over the course of a year is a lot of money.
Sure.
So in order for us to be numerically comparable, the $4,000 is what we saw was going to need to be there between Hampton, Suffolk, and us. Now that's all going to change this year when we look at, like, we're proposing the teacher increase. What ours is compared to what another division might do will also affect that. Yeah. But to be honest with you, I am happy to offer any level of signing bonus or referral bonus that we can to our educators. So
sure.
I will be grateful for anything that we feel like we could do.
I understand signing bonuses. A lot of people use them. A lot of private companies use them. Government uses them. That's the only concern I have, is it does seem a little bit higher. But thank you.
Yep.
Ms. Sullivan, what do you think today, if you were to do an average for the nearby schools, regional schools, how much lower do we pay teachers as compared to other schools?
So I think so it's interesting because the range, it kind of depends on your district's priorities when it comes to hiring. For example, some school divisions are going to make their first year teacher salary higher, and so that they can bring in those recent college graduates. In the last year, in looking at the salaries, we were in the out of 8 school divisions, we were in the bottom 3 in the first 15 years on our pay scale, but if you compare the second 15 years, we're in the top 3. So we pay our veteran teachers more competitively than other districts do, but our first 15 years on the job, we are not competitive at the same level. And so speaks to why we recruit a lot of veteran teachers into our district from other local districts, not only the climate and culture, but we are more competitive in pay, which just means that on our pay scale, we're giving a better step as they go along in the pay scale increase than what another division might do.
It wasn't a trick question, but you kind of helped me answer my next one. It sounds like you've done your kind of own informal compensation study.
Tried to compare as much as possible. It is difficult because the information posted online is not always accurate. And it's and how it's applied. Well, the numbers are accurate, but how it's applied and what additional funds might be given in the background based on what is posted online is something that is different in every division.
And this proposal would only apply to instructional positions?
So that would be similar to what we did last year. It was only classroom teachers. Because of the struggle that we have had with recruiting school counselors in this past year, my recommendation would be to add that position specifically. We have an opening. We've had 2 openings at Smithfield High School and 1 opening at Carsville all year long that we have not been able to fill. And so that position as well is something that I would want to consider. And again, some school divisions, they only apply it to critical need positions, like just math and science. However, as the critical need has increased, or critical shortage teacher positions, elementary is included in that now. So like there's a wider range of positions it would apply to. And at the end of the day, we need all of our positions, classroom positions filled. But that is flexible as well.
Okay.
I've just got one question for you. Based on last year's signing bonuses and referrals, shows that we had another 21 classroom teachers as part of that. How are we doing on retention once we get, how many of the 21 do we still have?
That had the signing bonus. So we have only had 2 teachers that signed with a signing bonus that are not currently with us.
Okay, that was it.
And that had to be returned, by the way. If they did a signing bonus, that was returned to us when if they did not fulfill their contract in the first year, they had to return the signing bonus to us. Yes.
That is a stipulation then?
Yes. The
Okay.
referral bonus did not have to be returned. You just had to have your referral start the year. We didn't, it's out of that person's control about whether the other person stays or not. But the signing bonus had to be returned to us, and it has been.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Sullivan, I know you do a heck of a job recruiting. In addition to pay, have you promoted or advertised the health benefits or the change in leave policy and all that other stuff? I mean, there's a little bit more to it than just money.
Yes. So we certainly, share with our employees about VRS. The unfortunate part, well, fortunate, I guess, every school division offers that, so that's very similar. Our benefits are good, but I think it's definitely something we, again, need to look at in terms of for the following year, next year, comparing those, and that's something else we can actually consider in the compensation study is comparing benefits as well as pay. But yes, we talk about our leave policies. We talk about all of the reasons why. Actually, recently, Mr. Elliott put together a great recruiting video that we've been taking out to the universities with us, and it's our teachers saying why they love teaching in Wight County. We're going to publish that soon for public view as well, because I think that speaks to the wonderful things about being an employee here.
Thank you. Anything else? Yes, sir.
Yeah, just, Ms. Sullivan, do you have any literature that you take out and use for recruiting events?
We do. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'd like to see some of that sometime. I'll
yeah.
swing by.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Good, Ms. Perkins? Mr. Cunningham? All right, let's move right along. Number 37, additional coverage payment.
Mhm.
Comments, questions?
Okay, so this is basically the additional coverage for teachers that are taking blocks, am I correct?
Yes, so this would
Okay.
be payment to pay staff, teachers who are covering extra blocks. I'm sorry, I forgot to switch my slide.
Okay.
Covering extra blocks due to a substitute not picking up a day-to-day vacancy by a teacher. So these are not for like filling vacancies that exist because we don't have a teacher in that spot. These are for those situations where there might be a late call out by a teacher who, wakes up in the middle of the night and is sick, can't make it in, and that they would, the teacher then ends up having to cover, another colleague ends up having to cover that block.
Okay, so this doesn't have anything to do with the funding for substitutes through ESS? This is totally separate?
It does not. So like right now,
Okay.
as you can see in the top right, we have an 81%, or top left, and we have an 81% fill rate for substitutes. And looking at that, the percentages that aren't filled are really due to the timeliness of the call out, which we all recognize the reasons for why that might be.
Sure,
But
sure.
ESS has a 25% fill rate for substitute jobs that are posted less than a day before, and then only a 1% fill if it's a call out of the day of. And we've all been in those situations where our kid wakes up in the middle of the night and is sick, and we can't go to work the next day. In
Yeah.
a lot of positions, the work it waits until the next day. In a teaching position, there are kids in that classroom that have to be at least supervised, if not educated on that day. And our staff are the ones picking that up.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Anyone else?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, sir.
I think this is also going to contribute to staff morale. As I have conversations with staff members in schools, they have discussed this as well. So not only did we add this, but this was also requested by our staff members, a way to show them appreciation for the extra work that they're doing.
Thanks, Doctor.
And I think that's all of HR.
Very good.
All right, moving right along. Finance. Dr. Coleman, I presume?
Absolutely. Mr. Chair, school board members, Dr. Kramer. The first slide that we're going to look at is the accountant for 70K. Now, one thing I wanted to point out here was this has been an ongoing conversation with the board, with Dr. Kramer and other individuals throughout the community. The problem is the IWCS is not properly staffed with analytical accounting staff and finance department. And we're working through that with different avenues of subs and consultants and different things of that nature. Of course, you already know what an accountant does, but the effects of an accountant in the department is needed greatly.
Is, with this, since seems like it's gonna be a hard-to-fill position, and in finance they generally are, would they be covered under the signing bonuses? Have you looked at that at all?
Not under our current plan. That would not be a signing bonus. However, with those, if this position is on our administrative pay scale or on our support, or really on our administrative, they would get experience with that.
Very good.
So that might be helpful
Okay.
in that.
Great, thank you.
I think we spoke at this at length at our last regular board meeting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Anyone else? 41, healthcare fund increase.
All right, of course, we haven't had an increase to the budget for the last 2 years when it comes to healthcare. Of course, employee share and healthcare costs have not been passed on to employee also in recent years. This is one of the recruiting tools that we've used, that the employees have not received that increase. And one thing to keep in mind, a healthy health fund is $1 million. That's what we normally like to keep. That's what divisions our size like to keep in their health fund normally, just to be healthy. And at this present time, the closest estimates that we have is with this increase of $500,000 will get us back to the $1 million. And that's what the closest estimates at this time.
Please.
Trying to think how to phrase my question. Go ahead, Mr. Collett.
Okay. My concern is every year, my healthcare costs go up. Retired. Plenty of my constituents say the same thing. Their healthcare costs. They get a pay raise, you know, a third, 2/3 of their pay raise is eaten up by healthcare costs. So at some point, you know, our employees do have to, you know, absorb some of the increase. But what I'd like to know is what is the percentage that we are funding versus the percentage that the employees are paying? And obviously that would have to be broken out several different ways. One's, you know, one for single coverage, one for, you know, married and spouse, and one for married and family, you know, or a domestic partner, however, you know, they work out. But I want to make sure that we're, you know, we're consistent. We're not charging an exorbitant fee because we want to use it as a recruiting tool. But we have to, you know, we've got to be fiscally responsible as well. So I would really like to get that information before I make any decision on how much of this I can support. Obviously, we do have to have the right amount of money in there. But I definitely want to know, you know, how much, what the percentages are. And I don't need to know the dollar amounts, but what the percentages are that are paid by the employees versus the division.
Yeah, and you had shared with me at one point that you wanted to know kind of what the county offered in terms of percentages. I did reach out and waiting to hear back
Yes,
on that.
yes.
So I can bring that information as soon as I receive it from them to
Perfect.
see comparatively to that. And just to kind of clarify this, the healthcare fund is, so we're self-funded healthcare.
Right.
And so we, to a certain extent, cover our own claims. We do have stop loss insurance, which means it prevents us at a certain point if once we go over a certain amount, that stop loss insurance will kick in so that we no longer eat that cost.
Right.
And so that $1 million is really there to ensure that we are able to pay until that stop loss is to kick in. And so even if health insurance increases occur this year and we decide to split that somehow between us and the employees, even in looking at this as a one-time fund to go back into the healthcare fund, because that has slowly been depleted,
Sure.
that would be something we would ask you to consider if it's not something that's annually added to the budget to help offset increases in premium rates, but just to get that back to a healthy spot as a division is probably in our best interest.
So, Ms. Sullivan, you're telling me this has nothing to do with premiums at all? This is just to get the fund
So
where it
this
needs to
is
be.
not meant to be for premiums occasionally, and it's completely okay. Sometimes school divisions will use a healthcare fund to offset premiums in
Right.
a year where it is not a budget request
Right.
increase, but the increase isn't passed along to the employees.
So it's my understanding that this is a contingency. So in the unfortunate circumstance that one of the school employees has some major heart attack, you know, this money will pay for those costs. Premiums are completely separate in this instance.
Yes.
And as Dr.
Okay.
Coleman alluded to, the recommended amount to maintain in that fund is about $1 million. And as I recall, the last handful of monthly financial reports, we were somewhere in the neighborhood of about 900,000.
Right, I can't remember the exact amount.
Yeah, well, I don't have the reports in front of me, but it was somewhere around 900,000 is where we've been teetering.
The other piece of that is if we ever were decide to not be self-funded and we wanted to buy into, it would cost us at a division our size, it would cost us about $1 million to initiate that conversation. And so that's the other piece of it is you always want that option to make that change if needed. And that's been advised to us by our insurance advisors, our vendors.
Everybody good?
Next slide is the retiree payout. And IWCS has not sufficiently budgeted for retiree payout in the past year. And this is the closest, estimates that we have at this time to cover the employee payout.
So, let's talk about that a little bit, please, sir. So, what we're saying here, and this is for we've had this discussion, this is for anybody who might be listening. If a retiree decides to call it quits and they have unused leave, sick leave, I don't know what all is included in that, this comes out of the school's operating budget. And currently, we do not have a line item in the budget to cover those expenses, correct?
So I don't have so that would be more of a finance department question. However, I do believe we have a line item. I don't think it's been sufficiently budgeted for.
Okay.
And this is based on conversations with the finance department. And so the retiree payout is so that, yes, if a person who has sick leave, they get paid out at $30 a day for up to 250 days, which is $7,500 max. However, if you have a person who retires on annual leave, they're going to also receive up to 30 days, because that's how much we allow them to accumulate, 30 days of annual leave, which is paid at their hourly rate. And so this figure was developed by finance, so I wouldn't want to speak specifically to that, but that is the idea behind it, and that is what was shared by finance, was that it has not been budgeted for accurately, and so this is what they suggested we needed in order to budget accurately for it. But that's the concept.
Mr. Chair, I'm
Yes,
sorry,
sir.
please, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Go ahead, sir.
I was just going to add, and just for the public, this number obviously vacillates depending on the number of retirees. So in my discussions with finance, this was a number they thought would be accurate, perhaps lack of a better term. This number would be sufficient in the event that we had a large number of retirees and payouts. So I think Mrs. Sullivan is correct. We might have a line item, but it hasn't been sufficiently budgeted for previously, and this number would help us get closer to a number that would sufficiently meet that need.
So if you could, in the coming days, at some point here, I'd like to get a little better understanding of that. What is actually budgeted for retiree payout, and what have we, on average, historically paid out? And I realize that number fluctuates. Staff come and go, depends on how long they've been in, so on and so forth, so.
Absolutely, we'll get you that information and perhaps give you some of the outlying years, what's perhaps been typical and what have been some of those anomalies. Because again, you could have a year where you have a large number of people retire and have more payouts. So perhaps we can get you, maybe Mrs. Sullivan, Dr. Coleman, we can look at the past several years and give you an estimate of what those costs would be.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Yeah, if we could get the actuals of those years compared to, you know, what we'll be looking at, because this looks like about 12 people, 13 people that would be maxing out an additional 200. So I don't think that would be outlandish to say that we wouldn't have that. So I've got a question on what will happen to these funds if we don't expend them at the end of the year.
So that's one of those places that the surplus comes in. Sometimes those are those budget items that we have to plan for, but that if they don't, those are typically where you saw funds roll back to the county if they weren't used. So we try to do our best to estimate. I mean, I can pull who's eligible for retirement on a given year from VRS. However, like this year, we have probably 60 individuals who are eligible to retire, and as of right now, we have 10 that have said they're going to. And so we're trying to make our best estimate on historical data when it comes to that on a year to year.
Sure.
But we can certainly give you some ideas around that.
Thank you.
My button here, I'm sorry. If I may, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Conversely, is that could occur as well, meaning if we had a year where we had a significant number of people retiring and not had enough in that category, we then would need to take money from elsewhere. So it's one of those cases where you'll probably not get it exactly right. In some cases, you're going to be under or you could be over. So we try to come up with a an estimate that is going to be as close to what we think we need as possible, knowing that, again, one year you might be over, and we would prefer to be over, and give money back to the county as opposed to not having enough and then having to take that money from another category.
I would agree with that, Dr. Kramer. I want to have a good, firm understanding of this, so when we have the Finance Committee going and talking with the Board of Supervisors, we know, how to explain it without somebody saying, hey, you're trying to pad it. And I want to make sure that people are well aware that that is something we will not do.
I think Mr. Colick is hinting on something that probably all of us have heard from the constituents, and that's, we see all the proposals. These are our needs, these are our asks, so on and so forth. And there's a lot of folks out there that are watching right now that say, what are we going to cut back? Where's the extra? And you said it well, Doctor. You have to plan for the unexpected. You go one way or the other. So as we proceed in this process and we start looking at the budget and the items and comparing our projections to the last year, that's one of the things that I'll certainly be looking at is where was that excess and what happened to it? We can call it whatever we want. We can call it excess. We can call it fluff. But, I know those funds get used. I think it's a matter of identifying how they got used. So for the sake of transparency, how are we spending all our money? Does that make sense?
I think that certainly does. And I think a good way to do that, and I have not seen a budget like this, is perhaps have, what was budgeted in a previous year and what the actuals for that year were, and that would help us be able to identify it. But I'm sure you all go through that when you're developing the budget to say, okay, we need to adjust in these places, so.
Anyone else?
If there's a way to find out what can be moved around where, like if we budget for the retiree payout, where else is it able to be used? If there's a way to break down somehow, that would help us explain things.
All right. So Dr. Coleman, I'm gonna spare you here. I'm gonna be the first one to say it.
Because we're all thinking it.
I don't know, and I haven't heard from Mr. Cunningham, and I'll certainly give you a chance to speak, sir, but I don't see this getting past the board. The contingency fund, given the totality of the past year, everything we're working through, we've worked through, I don't see asking the county for a $500,000 contingency fund passed in muster.
I understand. I did want to express to you truly in-depthly what it was for. Just, you already know that we have a contingency with the county, if you want to call it contingency, of the $250,000.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Capital maintenance.
The capital maintenance,
Yes, sir.
right now, absolutely. So with that, the 250, just off of, I'm just naming 3 different events that occurred throughout the year that probably would have forced us to go back to the county in an emergency situation to actually request funds. One would be the first day of the year when the Windsor well went out, and we needed to get the well up in order to get the school in session. Another one was when
And Dr. Coleman, if I may ask, how much money was that?
there was approximately about 132,000.
Right.
The next incident was the Smithfield Middle School gym floor.
Right.
That was approximately 84,000. And lastly, right now, we're working through a situation at Windsor Elementary with the reverse osmosis system, between 35 and 40,000. If those events occur throughout the year and we do not have access maintenance funds, we have no choice but to go back to the Board of Supervisors. So just to give you some background information on the request of that nature. Now, I do want to also add in, over the last 2 or 3 years, one thing that we didn't have to go back to the Board of Supervisors for is because we had other funds that we could use. The ones that we always talk about, the ESSER 1, ESSER 2, ESSER 3, we had other funds that we can actually dig into, the HVAC grant, different things of that nature. Well, those grants are depleted now and being depleted. With that stated, now we will have to start going back to the Board of Supervisors as we did before those grants was available. Just want to make sure.
So I will be the first one to welcome a conversation with our friends on the Board of Supervisors about that. That capital maintenance fund. And if that's insufficient based off historical trends, then we can certainly have that conversation. But as I read this presentation, this is in addition to. So if we need to have a conversation, and this is just one guy speaking up here, if we need to have a conversation about upping the 250,000 and or being prepared to entertain calls throughout the year for unexpected maintenance issues, that's one conversation. But a separate contingency reserve, I just don't see an appetite for that in our current state of affairs. And that's just me. I'm not
Yeah,
speaking for
and
anyone else.
I'd like to kind of echo that a little bit. But we've got a lot of things in these slides, and I've broken them out. And we've talked in this way, one-time costs. Now, the things I've broken out into one-time costs come to about $589,000, okay? That would eat it up right there. I would rather go in and say, hey, I need $589,000. This is what it is for, and the people of the community are gonna see it. And we also, you know, are asking for a lot of things that fall under capital improvement, okay? And my calculations come to almost $18 million there. So I would rather go to the county and have those conversations about what we need rather than what we might need, okay? Because these are gonna be hard enough conversations to have. And these are, I mean, the things that you have presented in these slides cannot be refuted. I've looked, you know, and as I have mentioned to a few of you, individually, there is probably one thing on here that I would say, no way. Everything else is easy to support. Collectively, we can't afford it, okay? But, so I would rather go fight for what I know we need and that the Board of Supervisors will understand. They'll know what they're going to see when they cut that check, okay? Thank you, Dr. Coleman.
Anyone else have any thoughts on that?
The only thing I would say is, if we definitely, with the problems we had last year, if we definitely don't, contingency funds or reserve line, that's risky. Because, yeah, the Board of Supervisors is probably gonna say, nope, you gotta show us exactly where you're gonna use the money. So what Mr. Collick said, that's probably the route to go, at least for this year and possibly next year. And after that, we'll revisit. But right now, it's like having a fluff fund, and we can't do it right now. And it's just being realistic. So we gotta gain our trust back, so to say. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else? All right, let's move along here. Let's talk about that proposed anticipated 3% raise, Doc.
As you see, this is a 3%, and the key word is anticipated raise for July 1, 2024. Employee salary increase of $2,065,000, and this includes benefits, and also a teacher step increase of $454,369. Now, this is the closest estimate that we have at this time.
So the short story is we're at the mercy of the state of Virginia to decide what, if any, state pay raise will be afforded to the schools, and then we'll have to figure out what the local match is. So we really don't know until we know.
That's correct, Mr. Chair, if I may add as well. Additionally, this is going to help keep us competitive in the region. I'm in meetings with other superintendents, and I don't know exactly what they will get, just as we don't know exactly what we will get in terms of support from our Board of Supervisors. But I do know that other divisions, virtually all other divisions are asking, at least in the region, are asking for at least 3%, if not more.
Thank you, Doctor.
Yes, sir.
I've just got a quick question. Just a little bit of background on this. Where are you getting the 3% raise as anticipated? Where's that information coming from?
The General Assembly. We are waiting to hear from the General Assembly, the governor. We don't know just yet what that's going to be, but that's what's being anticipated from all of our sources who are in those meetings. So that's what's being expected. That's what's being discussed. It's not been official yet, but it's being discussed.
Okay. Is this in any way related to, and I may have my numbers wrong here, HB 187 by any chance? Which, okay,
Delegate Clark's,
right.
yes.
So Mr. Collick might speak better to it than I can, but I think in my words, our elected officials in Richmond are politicking right now. So they're negotiating pay raises and all sorts of options are up there on the table, and they're going through the process. So
Yeah.
we don't know.
100%. We don't. There's been a couple discussions, as I understand it, on actually trying to give us more money than they normally do. There is a realization in the General Assembly that a lot of communities can't afford this raise. Okay, so we've got to watch it very, very closely. I think, I'm a big proponent, as everybody here knows, of the step increase before we give the raise. I just hope we can afford it. Okay. I think this will be something we come back to.
I don't want to have a choice.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into ops.
All right, technology will be first.
Mr. Cooprider.
Good evening, Board. Presented to you on the quad slide for technology. I tried to simplify as much as possible. Can you click it to the next slide for me? Thanks. So on the bottom right, you will see all 4 of the major increases for technology that are requested. These items encompass both student one-to-one devices that have been added since 2020 and have never been budgeted for, as well as increases in inflation on software that need budget increases, and there's also a repair and maintenance line that in FY22 dropped by about $120,000. We're asking to be restored.
Mr. Cooprider,
Yes, sir.
one thing that I prefer to see, I don't like seeing the slide say, hey, we need this much of an increase, unless it's accompanied by this is what the total will be. Or this is what we had last year, this is the increase we want. I've got to be able to see, what that is in relation to, how much did we spend on your first line, student one-to-one? How much did we spend on that last year?
So last year we spent the total amount that's being requested here because ESSER funds supplemented the difference. So that accounts for about $504,000 for MacBooks.
Okay.
That accounts for $20,000 or so for cases, and it accounts for about $180,000, $190,000 for Chromebooks.
So that's important.
Yes,
So
sir.
that first thing you just said, so our ESSER money has dried up.
Yes, sir.
So that's important to know, and I think we should all take note of that.
Yeah, we did know it was temporary to begin with. But if you could, when you get a chance, if you could get me that in writing,
Yes, sir.
what we spent last year, in fact, that could probably be on the budget, wouldn't it be in the budget book, Dr.
Oh, yes, sir.
Kramer? Okay, so you wouldn't have to worry about that.
Okay.
But just let me know what line items they are, so I know which ones to look at. That, for me, that's extremely important. I just don't like seeing, hey, this much increase, this much increase. I really want to see what we spent before and what the end product is. What are we really looking at spending this year? And maybe I'm unique in that case, but I've got to know what the bottom dollar is.
I've got the numbers now if you want them.
Okay. If you could shoot them to me in a
I will shoot
note.
them to you.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
On devices, are you asking for $10,000 for the next 4 years or $40,000?
That's a
for 4 years?
$40,000 increase for teacher devices. So currently, we have a 4-year lease with Apple. It's about $154,000 a year. That covers all of our teacher devices. That's not just classroom teachers. That's special education teachers, that's central office staff that are in the instruction department. That's your entire instructional tree, is what that number equates to. When I got the quote from Apple this year, that lease went from 154 to somewhere around 190. And it's not finalized yet because it's going to vary depending on whether or not we sign a contract before the end of March or after March.
Is it a better value to buy or lease?
Actually, up until March 31st this year, it's negligible either way. They are currently running a special at 0% lease. So that's their,
0% is unheard of.
that is Apple running a lease on their own devices just until the end of March.
Okay.
So after that, yes, it would be better to buy outright, but it is about a $740,000 price tag.
And how long do the computers generally last?
So we use them between 8 and 10 years.
Oh, very good.
We have 4 years in the hands of teachers. After that point, they start having more battery issues, more keyboard issues, and we rotate them into the public fleet. So we use them for substitutes. We use them for student carts. So when a student machine is having problems,
Right.
we use those for, in the past, we've used those for computer labs. In buildings, we don't use those as much anymore, but that's where those roll to. And we keep them between 8 and 10 years, and then we sell them off, which the board allowed us to do in December.
Extremely efficient. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
You presented this earlier this year too, the program where you issue a tablet or a device, and
Yeah.
when they're done, they get to keep it.
Yes, that
That's
was actually last year.
Last
That was for the Chromebooks.
Yeah.
Yep, and that's part of that funding. That's why that number's so large.
Yeah.
The Chromebooks were never budgeted.
It's all good.
Is there any other questions?
No? Good.
Thank you.
All right. As Mr. Brinkley comes up, it's just something I want to share with the board, Dr. Kramer, Mr. Chair. Now, with collaboration with the Isle of Wight School Board and the Isle of Wight Board of Supervisors has been instrumental in our shared commitment to prioritize school safety as the foremost consideration in the selection process for the capital improvement plan. Through ongoing dialogue and joint efforts, we have cultivated a deep understanding of the multifaceted challenges facing our educational institutions and communities. Their enthusiastic engagement and advocacy reflect a deep-seated commitment from the Board of Supervisors and from the school board to the well-being and the welfare of our students and our educators. By harnessing the collective expertise and resources of our community leaders, we can implement, and we have implemented, innovative solutions and deploy necessary resources to fortify our schools against potential threats. Together we stand united and are resolved to create a safe and secure learning environment and empower the students. Now, that's what I wanted to pinpoint before we went into safety and security. The CIP that was established 2 years ago with the board ranked school safety as our #1 priority. Number 2 was transportation and facilities, and number 3 was the new renovated West Side. Since initiating #1 as our #1 goal, we have installed a security emergency management supervisor, so 9 SROs, 3 SSOs, installation of night locks in all schools except for one. We're implementing that now in the West Side. Funds allocated for vestibules at every single school. Complete review of school crisis management and safety plans. Complete review of school traffic plans, and threat assessments for all schools are in progress. So being that school safety was our #1 priority, we have really taken steps towards that. So I really wanted to point that out to the school board.
Thanks, Doctor. You nailed it. So this board made it #1 priority. We went to the county. The county obliged us with some funds, and together we have made some significant strides.
Mr. Brinkley?
Okay, looking at the
looking at the weapons detection systems, these are items that have been previously presented, and actually just this past week on Monday, Ms. Perkins and myself had the chance to go out to Hampton High School to see multiple things, but this was one of the things that we got to see, put into place that morning, and the effectiveness of that and the use of these weapons detection systems at Hampton High School. So just running through it, the units that we have chosen, one of the reasons that we chose these units is the portability of them and also the price point on them. They're more cost effective, and the portability of them allows us to be able to use them not only at the entry points into the schools, but we can use them at athletic events, any other outdoor events, things of that nature. So that was the reason for choosing the systems that we did. And when we go into the issue that we have right now is currently we have no deterrent for weapons coming into our school buildings. We don't have any deterrent or any checkpoints for students to come through while they're entering the buildings. So that's one of the things that we're really trying to accomplish here is that deterrent factor. And we've said it over and over again that it's just is this going to solve all of our problems? Is this going to cure everything? No, absolutely not. But it's just another layer to our security that we're looking to implement. And the whole goal of this is to prevent the weapons or other unapproved items from coming into the school building. And you can see the pricing here on bottom right for the total, and what we're looking at and what we had proposed previously was a total of 8 units, and this would give us 2 units at each of our secondary schools. And the reason that we're going for the 2 units, as previously discussed, is all of our schools have separate entry points for students who are coming in, parent drop off, and then you have your students who are arriving by bus. So we have the 2 different entry points in every school. So we're looking to get these put in, 1 at each entry point, which would require 2 per school. And as previously mentioned, they can be picked up, taken out to the football field. Included in this price is a wider, more stable base plate for outdoor use, which would keep them from toppling, tipping over in the event we use them for those events. So I actually just had the quote updated actually last week. So the total for that, they're looking roughly around $18,000 per unit for a total of $156,098 for the 8 total units.
Now, I've got a question, Mr. Brinkley. No surprise. Are 2 going to be enough for each school? The reason I ask is you've got your larger schools, Smithfield High School, Smithfield Middle School. Do all the kids come through just 2 doors? And when I say 2 doors, I'm literally talking about 2 doors. In the front, only 1 door would be open, and in the rear, only 1 door would be open. If so, this would be the perfect number. But if we've got multiple doors being opened in the front, what is the appropriate distance between the 2 pylons, for the students to walk through? Would we have to get additional sets if we're using more than 1 door in the front or the rear, or if we're using multiple entrances, particularly from the CTE side in the back of the
And that's a very good question. That's one of the things that we mentioned previously. And the only school that I could foresee that being an issue with them not being enough would be Smithfield High School for the sheer volume, the sheer number of students. But as far as funneling them in through multiple doors, but funneling them down to, we can use other means with, as far as partitions, with ropes, things like that, to funnel them in to come through the weapons detection system. So even though they would be entering in through more than 1 door, we could use other means to funnel them through. And that is something that we would have to look at, and we would kind of have to take into account as we go. And like I said, we mentioned that before. If we see that the 2 units are not handling the volume, and if they're not providing enough throughput for the schools, then it may be something where we have to look at additional units for Smithfield High School.
Yeah, that would be my only recommendation, would be 2 additional units, specifically for Smithfield High.
we viewed a school just Monday, they had 2 units at one entry point for a school of 1,600 students.
Kids coming through
Very.
the back door too?
Well, the concern with having the extra ones, do we have the personnel to man those? You know, you had the security and then the people checking bags. Do we
So,
have that?
so what we would employ the help of not only the SSOs that we currently have at Smithfield and at Windsor High. We could employ the assistance of the SROs in the event contraband or something of that nature was located. But then we had talked about previously was much like we already have duty assignments established for our teachers, they would be there to kind of help facilitate that process. And obviously they would receive training on the weapons detection systems and the effective ways to continue that throughput.
Yeah, and the bottom line, if a door is open for students to come in, one of these really needs to be there, you know. And policies and procedures can be put into place, as we've talked about many times, so that certain doors cannot be used. But if we're going to use multiple doors, I would suggest we need, you know, multiple systems.
And in talking to the other divisions and the ways that they utilize these systems, they will even take, during the day at random times, they will take and move them to a different location in the school to make it completely random, where you have less students coming through, but to do those continued checks. And that's where the portability of this system really comes into play with the rechargeable batteries and things of that nature, where they can easily be moved.
Right. Yeah, the only thing I would suggest is just double check the numbers, see, you know, take another walk through Smithfield. I think you could probably use 2 more. Just a gut feeling from John.
And as we've said many times before, you know, additional units, if we're granted more, that would be excellent.
But there's got to be a need.
Anything else?
You want me to present this? One of the other things that we've discussed when we talk about our traffic plans outside of each school, we've discussed this in our operations meetings quite a few times. And for any of you who have come through right out here at about 8:30 in the morning, you see how hectic it can get out here. And one of the concerns that has been raised is we currently have teachers and staff that are performing these duties where it requires them to be out in the public roadway, and they're out directing traffic, you know, coming through people who are already running late for work in the mornings. And one of the concerns that's been presented is that the staff that we have out there doing this and performing these duties have not been adequately trained to do so. So we're looking at implementing a crossing guard program. Now with this, there's training that is available through VDOT, where they can actually they can do some online training, and then we would also work in conjunction with the sheriff's office and other groups to provide the hands-on training for them actually learning how to properly direct traffic and to perform their duties. But like we said, at this time, we do not have any trained crossing guards. And so really what this boils down to is a training issue, and then also to make sure that they have the adequate equipment that they need to perform those duties. And as you see down here, bottom left, this would be in addition to the budget of approximately $15,000. And this is based off of 9 personnel, which we had discussed, one at each school, and then also the uniforms and equipment.
And one thing that we are doing from a couple of different input was going back and looking at what school actually needed it more than others. So that's one thing that we're actually looking at now, but we did want to let the board know that we are addressing the issue of the crossing guards and the road guards. But we are looking at what schools need what more.
I appreciate that, Dr. Coleman, because not every school, you know, has the same needs. And I am, you know, I'm not a fan of having school employees out there directing traffic. I don't remember if I talked at talked about it with you, Dr. Comer, and Ms. Getz. But I am not a fan of that. The risk, is just, for me, too high. I wish we could develop some type of contract with the sheriff's department or the police departments, and have them out there, doing the traffic, on the street. And if we had a couple trained crossing guards, I could support it at a couple schools, probably not every school, because we're not here to create jobs. We're here to keep kids safe.
And that is something that has been previously discussed with the sheriff's office and as well as Smithfield Police Department. They run into the same issues that everybody else does, and that's the manpower.
Absolutely.
To have somebody dedicated during those times every day to just solely to go out and perform that function. It never fails, calls for service, things on the road take priority, and it pulls them away, and then we're left with nobody out there to assist at all.
You're absolutely right, and that's why I use the word contract. You have to develop some type of mechanism so they couldn't pull them away, unless it was a real, bona fide emergency. Somebody's having a heart attack or there's an armed robbery. But we definitely need to think this one through and make sure that we're reducing our risk, not increasing it.
Thanks, Mr. Brinkley.
Thank you.
Transportation.
Transportation.
Showing up in force.
I've got some questions on this. Gotta find them.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Sir?
So first off, we have Fleet Services building renovation. So as most of everyone in the room knows, that building was originally constructed between 1952 and 1955. It's not large enough to accommodate modern school buses. Can't be heated or cooled because the doors have to be open at all times when we're servicing and repairing vehicles. Lack of space inside the structure requires the use of multiple outbuildings around the facility to house our equipment, our parts, and everything else we need. So we are currently looking into a renovation, potentially, and we're looking at funding around $750,000 to do so.
And if I could add, Transportation Department has been asked to put together a form, some sort of building that they can actually exist in. So we put that building together, laid everything out in design, took it up. I think it was $7.5 million. That was the asking. Transportation then came up with a plan to have joint services with the county. Also, Transportation came up with other different plans for that, reduced it down to a $3.5 million, and that was a new building also. So there's been numerous plans that Transportation has actually engaged in to ensure that we are moving to the next level with the building and with the facilities. So I don't want anyone to think that this is the first time that Transportation has came up with a plan, and this is the first rollout. After everything else being pushed to the side, that's when Transportation came up and asked, can we at least get a facility that actually encompasses the individuals that are working, the mechanics on the inside, so they can actually get out of the inclement weather.
Well, you guys?
No, I didn't see it.
So Sully, with this $750,000, how many people are we going to entice to come work over there?
Well, so it's not going to be pretty. It's going to be an addition. It's going to look like a lot like that facility does now, how it's kind of piecemeal together. But it can be done. We can build it to accommodate 3 school buses entirely inside of the building. We've walked it out. It's possible to do.
So it'd be good enough to get by.
That's correct.
Okay. I think that's the wrong way to go. Okay. briefs you gave last year did not fall on deaf ears, okay? I am still a big proponent of not doing anything with that right now. I think that would be a great CTE building. But you guys need something that you can work in during the heat of the summer and the cold of the winter, that you're not gonna be running into each other, that you're gonna have enough room to work, we're gonna have enough room to get the buses in there, and whether we have, you know, something a dugout so you can get under the bus, or we have lifts, you've gotta have equipment that you can work with. We're gonna be asking for buses. Well, we've gotta be able to maintain them. You know, how many people are gonna take their car to a garage to get fixed when it looks like that? Or are you gonna take it to the state-of-the-art dealership, you know, to get it fixed, who you know has all the appropriate tools? So, I am not an advocate of fixing this. I am an advocate of getting a new building for $4 million, okay? It is on the notes that I will be submitting, and I think this would be a waste of the taxpayers' money. I really do. And I think having a new building will not be a waste of the taxpayers' money. And whether or not we fix any of the county vehicles, at this point, that's not an issue for me because we have our own vehicles. And if eventually they want to use some of our services and we do the intergovernmental billing, that's fine as long as you guys can handle it. But that's not a priority for me. Our priority right now is taking care of our kids, making sure they are safe, and making sure you are safe while you are working on the buses and the cars and the vans and everything else we've got. So that, you know, it hasn't fallen on deaf ears. So my support is behind a new building.
I agree with you. I actually, believe it or not, I woke up this morning, this was what I was thinking about when I was driving to work. Rolling around in my head all the stuff that we need. So we need umpteen school buses, big money. We need a football field repaired, it's in dire straits. We've got 2 tracks that are arguably hot garbage, my words. We've got stadiums in Smithfield High School that are, 30 years old. I'm forgetting stuff, I know I am. The bottom line is we've got a lot of, there they are, we got a lot of needs. And I look at this picture, I've walked through that building, you folks do good work over there. I see one add-on that was scabbed on, I don't know how many years ago. I sit up here as a school board member thinking to myself, how do you prioritize this? You gotta have school buses, you gotta get those kids back and forth. You can't have a track where kids can't even hold a track meet. You might as well close the whole door. It seems natural that this would get deferred years after year, and that's obviously what happened. Can anybody tell me when that add-on was added?
That would be 2012.
12. So that's, I mean, I just speculate here. I think it's a decent speculation that you guys have been kicked down the road since then. You got a Band-Aid in 2012, and here we are in 2024 talking about the same thing. So, you know, you can only kick this down the road so long. We got tough decisions, but I'm with you, Mr. Collick. Dropping in $750,000 to put another Band-Aid on a problem doesn't really solve anything. At the same time, we got to weigh our options. We've only got so much we can purchase. So I don't know. I think these are going to be hard conversations that we'll have to have with our friends at the county.
Yep. Absolutely.
Anything else? I'm not really giving you much guidance other than I don't know.
All right, so on this next slide, it's actually 3 different items. So we have 2 vehicles that we're in extreme need for. First is the box truck. That has been the logistical backbone of the division. Anything bigger than a printer has moved around in the box truck that we currently own, vehicle 66. And that went down this year. It is the second, actually no, it is now the oldest vehicle in the division. And we need a replacement for it. It gets utilized by almost every single department, and without it, it puts us in a pretty big financial strain because we have to rent a vehicle every time we need to move anything that's substantial in size. The second thing on here is our recovery vehicle. So we have an F-350, it's a recovery truck, air compressor. That actually has not been able to service the school system, the division, in the last 5 years for a whole year because it's so unreliable. That needs to be replaced immediately. It's our emergency response vehicle. It's what we use to pull a vehicle out of the ditch. It makes us look bad when we don't have it. And then the third thing on here is the increase of $84,000. We had $140,000 for general maintenance for our buses, and we want to increase that by another $84,000. One of the proposals that we created last year was for the increase because for our general education buses, we were spending $1,600 per bus, and the state average is $3,500 to $5,000. So we need to do a substantial increase so that we can provide maintenance and repairs to those vehicles.
Dr. Coleman, the box truck here, is that the same box truck you and I have been talking about?
Yes, sir. That's the same box truck that we were talking about. I think we had the box truck for 18 years. It was quite a while, and then, yes, that's the same box truck.
Okay, so, and it's used how often?
Daily.
Daily. Okay. So I'd like to see what what a lease would run as opposed to an outright purchase. If you use it every day, it might be cheaper to purchase. I don't know. But I think that would be something, to bring back to the board to let us know, what the difference between buying and leasing would be. The benefit with the lease is the company you're leasing from does all the maintenance and repairs and all that good stuff for you. And, so if you could look at that, and I get it for the other stuff.
Buses.
All right, so here is the buses slide, of course. In past board meetings, we don't need to rehash. I know our issues are kind of well documented to the board members, to the superintendent's office, to the general public. What we're asking for, considering also that buses, once they're ordered, they take usually 11 to 12 months or so to arrive. So what we have right now in February, soon to be March 2024, we have what we have now, we have what we're shooting for in the future. So this budget that we're discussing, anything that we order from this budget money that we're debating right here is probably not going to come till like August 2025. So we're trying to kind of forecast what our needs will be. So from past conversations, I've kind of revisited it, done a lot of talking with Dr. Coleman, Mr. Christensen, Mr. Sullivan. So we are proposing to receive funding for 20 school buses. Why is the number 20? We currently have 19 school buses that are 15 or years older. And once again, I know you guys are familiar with that. You've seen them. We've talked about them. And also, too, the apartments that are going to be opening over there in Ben's Grant, the new housing neighborhoods and so forth on the northern end. So we would like to add a bus as well. So that number's not totally random, but certainly it is a hefty price tag, as you mentioned. We're looking at 16 general education buses. That's what we would like to shoot for. The prices there about $145,000 each, and then 4 sped buses. They're a little bit more expensive, $155,000, because of course they have the wheelchair ramp and they have other specialized equipment and so forth.
I think we're all well versed in the school bus need.
If I can, these buses are capital investments. Okay, so, and that's a lot of money to be putting in a budget for capital investment. I would suggest we try to figure out exactly how many buses we need this year and how many buses we should be buying every year, and we get that put into the capital appropriation, if you will, from the county, and have them start buying the buses this year out of our capital funds at the county, not through the school board.
So, Mr. Colick, if I may, we've had those discussions with the county in the past. Our understanding of the CIP to the county is that it is ineligible for the purchasing of buses. We've had the same thought process as you did. We had those discussions with the county and were informed that they were not appropriate in the capital improvement.
I'm not talking capital improvement, I'm talking capital appropriations. Capital improvement is more, we want to build a school. I'm talking, we're spending some very big dollars here. Okay, the county's got, they've got a rainy day fund. We need these. We need so many every single year. So we can go into them and we can say, hey, we need you to add this many millions of dollars into our budget every year, which I think could be appropriate. But we need some of these buses immediately. Okay.
Yes, sir. I think we're speaking the same
Yeah.
language, and however the dollars are classified and what they want to call
But-
the fund is really.
Yeah, but I think there's a difference between capital improvement and capital appropriations. Okay, capital improvement, you're trying to improve the facilities that you have. You kind of get where I'm coming from?
I understand you very well, yes.
Okay.
Capital improvement is
Yeah.
not the appropriate funding source. The
Right.
appropriate funding source can be determined by the county. And
Thank you.
Yes.
I think we're saying the same thing.
We are.
Okay, we're talking past each other for a second there.
Yes, sir. We're on
Okay.
the same page. Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. So I think I would like to, go to the county separately and say, we need the money this year for these buses, and by the way, next year, we're gonna be asking you for that same amount of money, and it's gonna be dedicated to buses. Okay, I think it's very, very important. Now, what is that magic number of buses you need every year, considering growth?
So, yeah, I don't have the data in front of me, but we have it well documented. So certainly, once we get caught up, years down the road, we'd probably need 5 to 6 buses
Okay.
every year.
But Mr. Fike, let me ask you this. Once you get caught up, okay, we've spent 3 years and we bought, 60 buses. You're not gonna start in year 4 saying, now we need 5 new buses. Because you got brand-new buses.
Yeah.
We've gotta figure out what the right number is to start staggering it, so that every year from here on out, we're buying that right number of buses.
In my mind, the right number would be 4, 5, 6, possibly. That would be the sweet spot, based on the size of our fleet,
Yeah.
based on its current age.
And 6 is really the number I was kind of leaning towards, based on all the different conversations we've had and the different presentations you've made. So that would be my recommendation to the rest of the board is, we go to the county and say, hey, we absolutely have to have these 6. And by the way, whatever 6 cost in the out years, that's got to be an automatic addition to the budget. And we get that knocked out right now, this year, and we don't have to fight that battle again. Okay, thank you.
Sir, can I just have an addition to that? So
Yeah.
we also have a vehicle rotation established for the vans, the cars, and all of the rolling stock. And I can get that for you as well, because it's not just buses that we have to replace. We also have our light-duty vehicles as well we need to think
So
about.
you're absolutely right. We've got to do it, and we've got to do that across the board with every big ticket item we own. We really do. So that's what I challenged Dr. Coleman to get that in order, after we finish this budget cycle, to start working that, and you're not gonna finish in a year. Right. It's gonna take a while to get that documented, and then we've gotta get that rolling too. This is not gonna be cheap, folks. Or easy.
Food service? Thanks, gentlemen. I think we talked about this during the audit findings, didn't we?
Yeah.
We did, yes. This is directly related to the audit findings and is really the impetus of our staffing requests for food service. So as it currently stands, the food service department outside of cafeteria staff is a staff of 1. It's the child nutrition liaison position. That's the beginning and end of that staff. So what we have seen over the course of the past few years is two different things that have been working against us. Number one is that salary base for that position is not aligned with its duties and responsibilities. So what ends up happening is one of two things. We have somebody come in who is capable of doing the things that we need them to do for this position, but they realize real quick, I can go do this somewhere else for $30,000 more, and they're out the door. We've seen that happen a number of times. The other thing that's gonna happen is you're gonna get a candidate come in who is willing to take that kind of pay, but they're not up for the task. So it's a revolving door, it's not sustainable, and what we've seen over the past few years is somebody comes in, somebody goes out, somebody comes in, somebody comes out, and that was noted, as you mentioned, in the audit findings. So we know that food service is gonna be under a microscope. We saw that in the audit. We know we've got to have somebody in there who is strong and somebody in there who is gonna be retained. And the only way that we feel, that I feel for sure that we can do that, is to make that position a coordinator. That's gonna be more in line with what we're asking that individual to do, and the pay will be commensurate with somebody who will be able to come in and hopefully stay with us over a period of time to make sure that that department is stabilized. And then in addition, one of the other findings related to the audit, was that there was really a second individual that was needed in that department. They mentioned specifically when it came to the free and reduced applications and having a second set of eyes on there. We only have one set of eyes currently, so having another individual in there is going to help to make sure we do have a second set of eyes. It's going to reduce our propensity towards a single point of failure. When somebody does vacate that position, we are left scrambling, as we are right now, and having another individual in there who can kind of gain the knowledge with the other coordinator, we think will offset some of those risks that we're putting ourselves in our current position. And it's a $90,000 total ask for those two positions, one to be bumped to coordinator, and then the addition of the technician.
Thanks, sir. We talk about the ABM contract. Anybody have any questions on that?
No, I think make a good argument.
Yep.
All right. Let's push along here.
All right. This is the ABM contract increase.
You want to listen to it all?
Unless you want to just talk about the conversation we had.
Yep.
I don't think we don't need to get into it unless you want to.
Okay, just real quick, Mr. Christensen and Dr. Cohen and I had a discussion about the ABM contract the other day, and I believe that we're spending a lot more money having a contractor come in with custodial services than we would otherwise spend having our own employees. So what they're going to be doing over the next several months, 6-9 months, is really taking a fine look at that to see if in fact it would be more cost-effective and valuable to the school division to hire our own custodians versus have a contractor come in and do this. So there's no, we haven't come to any agreement saying, hey, this is what we want to do, this is what we don't want to do. And as I told both gentlemen, for what is needed right now, I'm going to support this year with the caveat that I want to see a very good analysis to see, what the right thing to do next year is.
Comments, questions? Ms. Perkins?
As I've been visiting schools, what I've heard from the principals is, one, that they need more custodians, and the second thing is they didn't like that they were under contract instead of employees. So I don't know what the cost difference is or anything, or if it's possible to put them back as employees, and, they kind of feel like the stepchild of the family right now.
And that's going to be summarized in the analysis that that Mr. Colick is talking about. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to add to that, if you employ your own custodians, then you have a significant more amount of oversight over those employees than you do having a contractor. With a contractor, if there's an issue, you've got to go to the contractor and hope that they respond to the employees. I'm interested to see what it's going to turn up as far as the amount, what's comparable, because I would like to see us have our own employees.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We'll definitely take a look at that.
CTE maintenance slide, number 5-9.
This is primarily for equipment,
Facilities. It's for the CTE facilities.
for the facilities. Okay. And we're asking 50,000. That an
Yes.
increase of 50,000?
This is an increase of 50,000 to the operations
Okay.
budget. These are the CTE facilities. Let's take the land lab, for instance. When we built the land lab,
All right.
one thing that didn't occur was we increased the maintenance and operations budget.
Sure.
So everything that goes toward the land lab was actually going toward 9 schools, and then would split with the land lab and the CTE building and the ROTC building and several other situations of that nature. So
Okay.
this is just an additional to the operations budget.
Got it. Thank you.
This is number 60. Anybody have any questions about the trash compactors?
No.
Let's get down to the nitty gritty. Let's talk about these high school tracks.
All right. As you can see, the Smithfield and Windsor High School tracks both are in pretty much the same condition. I'm in constant contact with not only the principals but the ADs of both schools. The tracks were constructed, one of them was 15 years ago since it was actually redone. And both tracks need to not only be resurfaced with the rubberized track, but actually need to be grinded all the way down to the baseline and then built back up from there. So the quote that we had for the recommended quote was $396 for each track. So with approximately $790,000 to $820,000 for both tracks to be completely redone.
Now, where's the most appropriate place to put this? In the budget, in a one-time cost, a capital improvement plan, or ask for additional capital appropriations?
I will venture to say, if I may, Mr. Chair,
100%.
I'm going to defer to the board. Obviously, you will be having discussions with Board of Supervisors. I know that there's an upcoming meeting at some point with the Board of Supervisors. So I would suggest we have that conversation with them. I think what's more important, if I may, I think it's essential that we find a way to get these repaired and up and running as soon as possible. I think we all agree. So I think the question is, how do we do this? And I do think our conversations with the Board of Supervisors is going to be instructive in terms of how we move forward. But I'm sure I can speak for all of us that we universally agree that this has to be done.
So I think there's liability issues if,
Absolutely.
they really don't.
Look, I'm gonna break the mold here a little bit, because I did go over to Smithfield. I've been to Windsor. I've walked that track. I've seen the football games. I've been to the softball fields. I've been to the baseball field. I went over to the Smithfield with Dr. Coleman and the AD over there. So there's a couple things that we discussed when we were over there, just for the board here. The Smithfield High School football field, rough shape. It's got holes in it. The drainage doesn't drain properly. So the football field needs to be resurfaced. The Windsor High School football field needs a little touching up, but it's okay.
Yes.
Both of those tracks we cannot host track meets.
Right.
That's unacceptable. It's a liability.
It is.
It's embarrassing. It's unacceptable any way you look at it. One of the things that was Dr. Coleman brought to my attention when I was at Smithfield with them was that if you do the track around Smithfield and you don't address the football field this year, you're actually going backwards, because then at a later date you're driving heavy equipment across the track.
Across it, absolutely.
I say that because I believe you need to package Smithfield High School's track and field together. Windsor High School track needs to be done. I would propose as we move forward that the bleachers at Smithfield are old, they're 30 years old. But I think we can defer that for a year for the sake of getting a field and a track taken care of. The lights that we've got here at Windsor High School, they need these lights. As far as I'm concerned, and it's just me, if it's $31,000 and they're throwing sparks when you flip a switch, we need to pull that out of our existing capital fund and make that happen as soon as possible. That's my opinion, and I don't know that the superintendent needs board approval to do that. We've still got money in that fund. I would suggest that the new light install at the Smithfield High School fields, I would suggest that those just get deferred. Let's take care of the emergent ones first, and a new install we can do later. Certainly we all want it. Safety, liability, that's gotta come first.
Well, I think we do have to address them, even though we want to defer them because they are capital items and there's going to be a bond float in another year or two, so they've got to be identified now so that we do get funding for them in the future years.
I agree. I'm not arguing with any of that. And I think slide 66, the handicap seating and sidewalk at Smithfield High School, when the bleachers are replaced, and they need to be replaced, you can scratch this off the list because the new stadium, we can get stadium that accommodates handicap seating. So those would be tied together.
And let me say just one thing about the handicap seating. It's got to be incorporated into the general seating. Please make sure that happens.
And yeah, I'll stop with that. I mean, listen, I'm no athlete. I ran high school track and cross country, probably the most uncoordinated, unathletic guy you're ever going to meet. Don't watch football, don't watch sports, but when I went over and saw this, I was embarrassed. So there's, we got to handle this.
Jason?
Yes, ma'am.
Question for clarity. Are these safety issues, or we don't like the way they look to outsider issues?
They are safety issues.
100% safety issues, and we are talking about athletics, but even our physical education students use these fields and can't use these. So this is absolutely safety. It's for instruction. I mean, there are a number of things, and I think the chair articulated it very properly. You mentioned all of the things that we need these for. I think it's all of the above. But most importantly, our students can't use our fields, our tracks on a daily basis. For physical education, we can't use them for athletic events. This has to change. I think we all agree with that.
I don't think the pictures do it justice. And I would encourage anyone who has it to go walk the track.
I'm sorry, please continue, Mr. Cunningham.
No, I was just saying, I've seen it. I mean, it's been bad for years. And yep, we've been kicking the can down the road. So it's past time. I've gotten calls, I've gotten emails from parents saying that their kids have been hurt playing on the field. So, yeah, it's a lawsuit possibly coming to us. So we should have been jumped on it, but, now's the time. We got to do something. And this is a priority right here.
Mr. Chairman, before your next point, I want to add to what you just said. You said we should go see them. The pictures do not do them justice. And as awesome of a photographer as Mr. Elliott is, you do have to see them. I suggest that we find a way to invite all of you to see not just the tracks at Smithfield, but let's look at the facilities at Windsor. Some of the other improvements we're recommending, the Fleet Services Building. I would suggest that we find a way for both our school board members and our Board of Supervisors, and we can work around you all's respective schedules, but I think it's important that the decision makers, school board members, Board of Supervisors, be invited to see this. And I'll certainly work with Dr. Coleman, Mr. Christensen, and others to make that occur.
And I propose that we just start talking about the HVAC and wrap this up.
All right. Carrollton HVAC, I think you've seen several different presentations concerning the HVAC. And this is a summary of the HVAC once again. We've been invited to the Board of Supervisors. We gave reports. We brought the experts in. We have the layouts. We have the plans. We have the design. But now what we need is the funding for Carrollton HVAC. We know exactly what the issue is, and now we need to act on that issue. And everything else is laid out. It's pretty cut and dry. Carrollton needs a new HVAC system. And every year that we wait, I think I've sent to you the price escalation. Every single year we wait, it will get higher.
So, we've seen this.
Yes.
We've talked about this.
Yes.
So, if anybody's watching, and I hope some people are paying attention, watching the stream. So, a couple months ago, it was a while back, we signed a resolution with the Board of Supervisors for the 1% sales tax referendum. It's passed the House, it's passed the Senate, it's at the governor's. Hopefully the man signs it. I think for expectations and best case scenario, if he signs it, hopefully we can get a referendum on the ballot this coming November. If the public votes in favor of it, hopefully we can use some of that. And I hate planning on hopes and prayers, but Lord willing, that will help us with some of this stuff. No easy answers here. I don't know. What were you folks?
Well, I think when we go and have our discussions initially with the Board of Supervisors, that HVAC's got to be our number one. That's got to be number one. It's the most expensive, and it's health-related. We've got teachers, we've got students who are getting sick over there, okay? And then that's got to be quickly followed by the buses. And then we've got to really list out everything else in priority, depending on whether it's a one-time cost, and we should have several different lists. You know, this is what we want for the budget. This is what we want for the one-time cost. This is what we want for capital improvement, capital outlay. And then start our negotiations there, and we see where we go. But we're definitely going to need the help from you folks to help us, you know, prioritize it, because you're working it every single day. I can come up with a priority list. In fact, I have, and I'm going to send it to Mr. Marsh tomorrow. But really, you're the ones that are working it every day, you know. So there's going to be some places that there's going to be a great meeting of the minds, and we're going to say this is easy. There's going to be other places that's going to be difficult. So the sooner we get going on this, the better. So, you know, my suggestion is we just move forward and we get over to talk to the Board of Supervisors, you and I, as quickly as possible, and you will have my my priorities tomorrow.
Okay. We'll get everybody synced up here. So I have communicated with all the board members separately, and I've requested each one of them to go through all these slides. And if there's anything on here that you believe should be deferred until a later year, so send that information to me. And I believe as a general rule, if 3 or more of us would agree that any specific item can or should be deferred, we can take that down and we can start whittling away at this. We have a upcoming public hearing where we'll solicit feedback from the public. At some point, I'm sure Mrs. Briggs will tell us how the survey went. That's all valuable information, and we will continue to prioritize, as Mr. Collick said. I think we're going in the right direction. I think the 5 of us probably agree, much more so than not.
The only thing that I would caution is on any of these big ticket items, do not put them down to defer, because they're going to be deferred anyway through the process.
100%. 100%. And I actually spoke with Supervisor McCarthy this afternoon. I'm going to send out an email. As per our discussion when we presented to the supervisors a few weeks ago, we're going to set up some initial talks and kind of get a feel for where they're thinking, what they're looking at for funding. And you have my word that we'll share everything with the board collectively. So, and the staff. So, any other closing comments?